Hey everybody, welcome back to the Live Ultralight Podcast powered by Outdoor Vitals. Today we have a From the Trail, or rather From the Car episode. Me and the gang have just completed our 100-mile segment of the Colorado Trail. So in the car with me here, we've got Tyler, Derek, and Brigham, if you want to say hi.
Hey guys.
Hello.
And we're just going to kind of be talking off the cuff about what we just did and how everything, went down for us out there. So for those of you that don't know, it's a good time to explain why we do these 100-mile segments in the summers. We have a group called the OV 100 Mile Challenge, where people can, join the challenge, and then they do either a stacked or a nonstop version of 100 miles of their choosing. It's a DIY program where we do a framework, live trainings. We've got swag and things that we'll give away with that as well. Finishers pins. It's a really cool program, but it's really just a great excuse to get people out on the trail. And for us, that's part of why we do this. And then obviously the other part of it is for us to just be constantly testing our product, be very connected with our product, innovating, etc. And so many uses. And this is the group that, raises their hand and says, yeah, I'll come and do 20 miles a day out on trail. And so we've condensed this 100 miles into a 4.5 day window yet again, even though we really were pushing for 5 days. I mean, Tyler at least wanted to drag it out to 5 days before we started, but honestly, it worked out really well, and we'll get into the details there. For us this year, we did start on the Durango side of the Colorado Trail, and that was mainly due to just how hot it was and some of those kinds of factors. Plus, really love the San Juan Mountains, so don't have to twist my arm much to start on that side of the trail. But hopefully we'll go back and finish out the segments over the next couple of years, 100 miles or more at a time. Started out in Durango and did 100 miles up past Silverton. So what did I miss as far as laying the groundwork for what we've been doing?
Well, one thing with the Colorado Trail is this is just the first 100 miles. I don't think you mentioned this, but we do plan on going back. We know that the Colorado Trail is, a whole lot longer, but because of our own time restrictions with family, with work, with, so many other things going on in our lives, we find it's a lot more doable to bite it off in little chunks. So we do plan on going back, but the first 100 miles was definitely a really cool experience.
Yeah. So, I mean, we just went out there, set it out. Maybe before we hit the trail, what were some of your guys' expectations of how the trail would be and how things would go?
I was expecting a lot more, basically similar views to the Uinta Highline Trail that we did the last couple of years, which there were a few. I was expecting some up and down climbing and going back down, but honestly, I think there was probably a lot more elevation change on the Colorado Trail than I had expected.
Yeah, I think when we planned these trips and before we kind of decided that we were going to do the Colorado Trail in 4 or 5 sections, we just kind of always gravitate towards what's the biggest, most awesome mountains that we can get to in the amount of time that we have to go. And so we actually looked at some routes in Idaho as well as Colorado when we were very first planning. And when we landed on the San Juans and we got a route planned, we could see that we had 100 miles and, 29,000 feet of elevation gain?
I believe it was 19,000.
Oh, 19,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was 19,000 feet of elevation gain in our route. And so as we got closer to it, I just knew it was going to be up high with a lot of amazing views, and it's going to be a lot of work because that's a whole lot of climbing. So that's a lot of what I was expecting, was just big mountain views and big climbs. And
I mean, for reference, last year the Uinta Highline Trail, I believe on paper or on the mapping softwares we use, that one was about 16 to 17,000 feet, I want to say. So this was more vertical gain and loss than last year's.
Yeah, I'd say as far as expectations, I kind of don't really pay attention or care too much about whatever the vertical is. I like to just go to a place and whatever it is and enjoy it. So my expectation for the Colorado Trail is I kind of knew that the section we were doing would be kind of a higher average elevation a little bit than, say, the Uinta Highline Trail, which we did last year. But for me, that kind of fixed an expectation for what I have experienced at elevations like that. So my expectation was a lot of, hiking at or above tree line and kind of that environment where it's like a transition to, there's some forest, but it's mostly you're up high with these wide open views the entire time. So that was kind of my expectation, was to just have a lot of big mountain views the whole time. And honestly, the other expectation I generally just assume with this kind of elevation is that it's an expectation of mountain weather, which means like when you're over 10,000 feet, it just does not get hot. And so that was an expectation that we'll probably get into in a little while.
I thought you were going to say the expectation for mountain weather was that it changes on a dime.
Yeah, that's true too.
I was definitely
which we'll discuss
that.
some more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do need to unpack that, because that was a paradigm shift that I experienced on this trip as well. But maybe talk for a minute, kind of go around just what you guys do to prepare for things like this, both in terms of physical and if there's anything gear-wise that kind of is worth highlighting. I guess I'll go ahead and start with that question though. For me this summer, I am signed up to do another ultra marathon. It'll be basically a week from right now, so got some time to recover, about 7 days, and then we'll be back at it. But so most of my training hinged on that. So getting just a lot of miles in running on trails. Not as much with the pack on, which I felt like I would have enjoyed doing a little bit more of that. But at the same time, I've had a lot of good success with just getting miles and just like that strain on the body per se, on the feet, the ankles, the knees, and just keeping mobility and stuff like that. So I felt like that worked out quite well for me on this trip. But and then as far as gear goes, I would say not a lot changes for me. I feel like I've got a lot of my systems down, and the things that I'm going to take are pretty static. And I mean, if you're really interested in that, you can always go to outdoorvitals.com and pull a checklist off the website. But going into this type of terrain, typically I plan for like 3 season conditions, meaning it can get really cold really fast. It can be really hot in the day, but it can be really cold at night. Storms can roll in, so I'm always bringing rain gear. But also I'm usually bringing some forms of insulation, and I'm bringing, I do bring thermals to sleep in. And then, usually it's kind of a debatable thing for us, I would say, between using a 30-degree top quilt and a 15-degree top quilt. I used a 15-degree top quilt this time because I wanted to test an insulation that we have in a model, a prototype. But it is debatable, I guess, for me, typically, whether it's 15 or 30. We've been on trips like this where we've literally got snowed on. So I think that's where the debate comes in, because on that trip, I think those that had 15-degree top quilts were very happy we had 15-degree top quilts. But turns out it doesn't always need to be the case. So, yeah, Tyler?
For me, I was moving from one house to another like through the spring of this year, so I wasn't getting my normal routine of exercising in, and so I actually was starting my training a little bit late. And for those who are familiar with the OV100, you'll know that as part of that challenge, we give a framework that teaches how to prepare for your 100-mile race or trip. And a lot of that framework was written through all of our experiences, as well as just a lot of knowledge that comes from the ultra running world, because there's a lot of crossover there. And essentially for that training program, the idea is that you ramp up your mileage in small increments every week with a weighted pack, and the closer you get to your trip, the more you try to simulate the weight of your backpack, the elevation gain that you'll be on your trip, and the altitude that you'll be doing your trip at. And I didn't have time this year to follow our own plan as good as I wanted. And so what I did was I took one of our new fast packs. We have really cool running fast packs coming out here shortly that are really great for the training that I did. So I would typically go running with this fast pack with I started with about 10 pounds, and by the time I was done I was at about 20 pounds in it, and I would run from my house to a trailhead I'd run through town for about a mile, hit the trailhead, and then go up the mountain from there. And that was the majority of my training, was like running in this trail network that has some decent elevation and terrain, and I think that plan worked quite well. I did find that I had a lot of struggles with plantar fasciitis through April and May as I was trying to kick my training off and get prepared for this mid-July trip. And so that slowed me down a little. I had to try a couple of different pairs of shoes, and I ended up doing 3 different shoe insole inserts, and finally landed on a combination that worked for me. And through all of that troubleshooting, came out in a fairly good position. I'm feeling pretty good here after finishing this trip.
Maybe without getting into too many details, what did you land on as far as the insole?
Yeah, so I think what caused my plantar fasciitis was a combination of spending really long days on my feet in bad shoes, because I was remodeling a house. And so I would work, really late nights and every single weekend, and I just had bad shoes. And then I just went straight into kind of bigger mile runs. Like, I think my very first training run was like a 5 miler, and then later that week I did a 7, and I just thought I would be able to pick it up really fast. And I think I came on way too strong for being inactive through the winter and spring, and then I didn't have great shoes when I started. So what I ended up with was Hoka Speed Goats with some Super Feet insoles, and then I just learned to do constant massaging and foam rolling and things like that. And it's been a learning curve, but it's been really good too. So
awesome. As far as gear goes, anything that you would add or change from what I already said?
No, I think this is the heaviest I've ever had the CS40 loaded, between the camera gear and the Impulse extra calories that I added to my pack that I didn't eat. And it was awesome. It handled it great and was really comfy.
Okay, Derek, how'd you train?
So I was in a similar boat as Tyler. So my wife and I, we just bought a house really around Christmas time or New Year's. And so I've been pretty dang busy with that. So what I've ended up doing is just running every day that I can, which is most weekdays. I'd run about 5 miles roughly. That's on average kind of what I would run every single day. I've found that with the limited time I had with different projects or priorities, there were some health issues that we were dealing with too. That was pretty good training, but I wish I would have done one other thing, which is just include more elevation training. This year, I don't know that I felt as prepared for all the climbing. I handled it. Obviously, we made it, and it worked, but it would have been more fun, and I would have enjoyed it probably a lot more if I had trained more for elevation specifically. So I built up a lot of endurance with running, and that was a good thing. Miles were not a problem. Clicking off a lot of miles in a day, definitely not a problem. But there was a point for me where, you know, after I've climbed so much in a day, it got pretty tough. So that's what I did. I do have some things that I wish I would have done better, but I think even if you only have an hour a day like I did to train, just do that, and that's still going to be a lot better than nothing. You're going to have quite a bit of endurance and stamina that you've built up, and yeah, that worked pretty well for me. But I do have some things I would change next time.
Yeah. And Brigham, I will preface Brigham's training with the comments that I think Brigham's training is probably the most ideal for this kind of stuff, specifically for backpacking. But so pay attention to this one.
Well, I don't know if you pay attention or not. It works for me.
Yeah,
it works for me.
Definitely works for him.
And I don't really train for anything specifically. So anything that I did a month ago was the same thing I did a year ago, and so I just try to have a balanced. I do 2 days at the gym where I'm working on strength. So I do kind of a full body, you know, legs and upper body strength training at the gym 2 days a week, and then 2 days a week I do a weighted pack hike. So I just keep I maintain a 50-pound pack that I just grab and go. I do that twice a week, and just hike up a mountain for an hour and then turn around. And then the other 2 days of the week I run 5 miles. So about 10 miles of running a week, and then some pack hiking, and then some gym work, and it works for me. I felt really good on this trip. So as far as gear goes, I think everything's echoed. You know, there's not much that changes other than anything that is being prototyped. I typically am trying to work that into my kit for any given trip. So if it's appropriate. So if it's not appropriate for the trip, I'm obviously not going to bring it. But what was interesting this year was my trail weight. So all my gear, food, water, and fuel was within a half a pound of last year's 100-mile trip, and I thought that was pretty interesting.
It's very consistent for sure. Okay, so there's kind of the preemptive start of everything. Our training going into this, we're trying to do 20 miles a day, be climbing 19,000 feet. It'll be definitely a big effort. The plan was to do it over 5 days, meaning start on Monday morning. We're going to get a shuttle out of Silverton that take us down to Durango, to the trailhead actually, and then from there we would start the trail, get back to Silverton, and try to basically hitchhike a ride back into town once we were coming off the trail. So we start on Monday morning. Plan was to get out on Friday and then begin to travel home Friday, and then likely get home by Saturday because it's eight or so hours of driving for us. But so we drive over, we sleep the night in Silverton, which was also on purpose because it did allow us to acclimate. Silverton is at 9,000 feet, so it gives you a little bit of, you know, sleep at elevation before we immediately climb into some very high basins and areas. So we do that. Caught a sweet shuttle out of Silverton down. Was it Hermosa?
Yep.
Hermosa bike tours or something. Hermosa tours. They were awesome. Definitely helped us out a lot. So.
They also maintain a couple of the sections there and do a great job on the trail.
Yeah, their focus is definitely more around biking, and we found out on the trail that biking is a big part of the trail, especially in this area. But yeah, they definitely help with maintaining it, and we'll get into trail conditions too. But so we start off on Durango side. I want to say it's about 9:30 in the morning, and start the climb. I don't know what else to say. We were definitely concerned because it was very hot. In fact, on the way over, we even experienced some temperature warnings in the vehicle. Just extremely hot. We're definitely in that season here in the west where we just need the monsoon seasons the monsoons to come in because it's really hot, really dry. But not much rain has arrived, so it's still just hot and dry. So definitely that was a concern leading in. Is the forecast was for Durango to be over 100 degrees, and we were going to be obviously starting really close to Durango and then just hiking up and out of there. So yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on day one and getting started?
Our packs were heavy. They were full of food. 100 miles worth of food is quite a bit. And we knew it was going to be a big day because Durango is right around 7,000 feet in elevation, right? And so we knew we were going to be getting up to around 11,000. And so I think we all kind of knew it was going to be one of our toughest days because we were starting later in the day than we normally do. And it was going to be at least 4,000 feet of climbing.
Yeah, we hadn't figured out the Far Out app yet, so we just knew from trailhead to camp we were looking at about 4,000 feet of climbing,
Plus
without
all
looking
the ups
at,
and downs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we kind of knew we had it in for us, but it was harder than I expected. It was hot.
I think for me, the heat was the hardest thing. I mean, I don't think the trail was overly steep. I think you've already touched on this. The trail conditions were really nice. Like it was, not super rocky or full of roots or whatever, but just the heat made everything exponentially harder. Just to do the climbing and to go the miles when you're just sweating your guts out. I think, Tayson, you mentioned you sweat. The amount of sweat that you put out that day was more than you probably ever have in your life.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know. I mean, other than the Grand Canyon and that day out of Durango, absolutely more sweat came out of my body than should ever be possible.
I'm probably right up there with you. I mean, you made a comment on the first day when we were partway through that day. I showed up to where you guys had stopped on the trail because I was, walking behind you a bit. And I was just drenched in sweat. And you're like, man, Derek, I don't think I've ever seen you look this hot and miserable before, ever.
Well, the biggest reason I said that is, one, you were actually sweaty, which you don't get nearly as sweaty as me. But two, even in your face, your lips looked like they were losing color, like they were white almost. And it just almost looked like kind of like an early sign of dehydration, like your red face and then your lips kind of not as flush as they usually are. And I was like, so I kind of made a few calls just seeing how you were feeling because you could see it a bit.
I was definitely having a really hot morning, to put it one way. I think I was okay on hydration and overall I was doing pretty good, but I just don't enjoy the heat. You can ask my wife. We got married in Mesa in July, and that was probably one of the best days of my life. But at the same time, the 30 minutes of that day where we had to take pictures out in the 115 degree weather, that was not a fun 30 minutes. So me and heat, I don't know. I'd prefer to be cold than overly hot.
Yeah, I think we just got unlucky with the weather pattern. I mean, it is July, and starting a hike down low, it's obviously going to be warmer than up high, but I was very surprised that, I don't know what, the mileage that day was like 20-something, low 20s in terms of miles, but we just kept climbing and climbing and climbing, and I kept kind of thinking okay, once we get around 10,000 feet, it's gonna feel good. And it never did. I mean, we got above 10,000 feet, but it just never seemed to cool off like I would expect any other hike to at that same elevation. And yeah, it was a bit of just a long, drawn-out, very hot day.
We slept at 11,000 feet, which meant that by the end of the day, we clocked over 6,000 feet of climbing on our watches. And sleeping clear up there at the top of the pass, it was still hot at night.
Yeah, it didn't really cool off that night. We were just warm, clear until the next morning, which then we got even warmer.
Yeah, I mean, as far as just the journey up to, I think that was kind of our first taste, obviously, of being on the Colorado Trail. So we're meeting people, we're kind of getting the culture. I mean, the first thing I would say is I'd probably call that the dog park trailhead. I mean, about every hiker that was day hiking had a dog or two, and not a problem, but it was just surprising because I feel like at least in our little city where we do a lot of trail running on local trails, not nearly that many dogs and not nearly that many dogs just wandering around, but lots of people hiking for the day, lots of trail runners, and lots of bikers too, which I don't know, like I've heard of people bike packing the CT and whatnot, but I didn't realize that there was just going to be that many bikers. So we were kind of, I mean, one thing I'd just say is you do kind of keep your head up for bikers after being on that trail a while. It was good. I mean, we met some people that knew us. We got to talk to some brand new backpackers that were, from the Midwest, and just overall, lots of good people to talk to. And as we moved farther and farther up the trail, I think we got out of like the day hikers and the little bit newer hikers and got into people that were for sure hiking the Colorado Trail or starting out on their journey to hike the Colorado Trail. And so had some really good conversations with people like that as well. And just like I don't know, we met a lot of people and had a good time kind of getting into the trail a little bit.
Yeah, everyone we passed was as friendly as anywhere I've ever hiked, which was fun to talk to people and see so many friendly people.
Yeah, I really thought everybody I passed seemed so friendly on that trail. I thought that was awesome. There wasn't really anybody kind of grumpy or angry that anybody else was out there in the woods or in nature. And it's just kind of everybody's pumped that other people were around too.
Yeah, I thought something that was really interesting, similar to what you guys were talking about, but it wasn't specific to day one, was it seemed like almost everybody we talked to on the trail, it's like everybody had this awareness of this backpacking thing and the Colorado Trail, whereas like we never really had to explain to anybody what we were doing. It's just like if somebody asked, it would almost be like, well, which direction are you going or where are you going? So it seemed like everybody, including day hikers or people that were just on like a 1 or 2 night trip, they all could relate to what we were doing. And I felt like that was a little bit of a new experience for me. I mean, when you're backpacking in the mountains, you run into other people, they're probably backpacking too, but there was something a little bit more familiar with everybody we talked to, that they, there was just like this heightened level of awareness or relatability that everybody was kind of associated with what we were doing. I thought it was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you've hiked on other through hiking trails, you're going to have experienced that. But it is different because you hop just over a state line for us, and that changes, right? Like when we're hiking the Uinta Highline Trail or other trails, like people don't necessarily know where you're coming from, where you're headed, or just day hikers aren't even familiar with the trail you're doing. And so there's a sense of camaraderie with any through hike, I feel like, it's really palpable. It's really, and you pick up on it really quick, and it's cool just how many people support it, whether they're doing the hike or whether they're day hikers or anything in between. It's a really cool experience. So segmenting through hikes, it's worth going and doing and experiencing just for that sense of community to, just be able to experience that too. So as far as day one goes though, yeah, it was a brutal day. We passed a lot of hikers. That day was like, we overtook more hikers that day than any other day, I would say for sure. It's just like we were just passing group after group after group. And then in the evening, we start passing camps. We took our dinner at mile probably 18, 19. And we'd already done over 4,000 feet of climbing. And I think we had a bit of a discussion whether we should call it a day right there or push on. We ended up deciding to push on, get over the 20-mile, march that we talk about a lot, and get up to 11,000 feet. What did you guys? I mean, as far like, were you guys? I know I'll get into how I felt at the end of that, but how did you guys feel at the end of that? Were you fine, adequate? Any thoughts on just how the day ended?
Yeah, I think the discussion started with like, well, we have good weather, we don't we don't want to slack off on a good day and not get enough miles in, so that we have a deficit on a harder day where there's potentially bad weather or bigger climbs or something like that, and just kind of start behind the pace. And so that was like the argument for going all the way up and over the pass. I think the other side of that was we didn't want to overdo it too bad on day one and then be lagging through the rest of the week or cause an injury or altitude sickness or something like that. So we were kind of treading the line there where we were trying to figure out what the right balance was for the group.
Yeah, I mean, we ended up deciding to push up and through. Obviously, on day one, too, I feel like you come in with high energy and high morale, and so you feel confident to be able to push on and whatnot, and that's what we did. We got up to camp, and right after dinner is where we broke above tree line, right, and that was a nice end of the day, I would say. It did get a little bit cooler because we got out of the sun, but it didn't feel much cooler. Still very hot coming up and through the pass, but at least...
It was so steep.
Yeah, extremely steep. We climbed 1,700 feet right after dinner up to our camp, but we did get out of, like I say, the tree line, and so we got some of those views that we, I don't know, that most of us, I would say, in this car are especially addicted to. Just that high country look. Getting back in the high country was really, really nice to happen at the end of the day. We were able to get some water and then find camp pretty quickly, and we were setting up right on the cusp of it being dark. So, you're basically able to set up camp without a headlamp, but right on the border of that. Got camp set up pretty quickly. For me, this is kind of where I had a bit of an issue prop up, which was I was definitely feeling dehydrated by that point when we had stopped to filter water. I squatted down to filter, and when I went to stand up, I got pretty lightheaded, which is a sign of being dehydrated, and I kind of noted it there. And I definitely pushed, when we got towards the top of the pass, I definitely just pushed to get through the pass. I didn't want to really slow down. I was kind of like, you're close to the end, so just finish strong type of thing. And I think between pushing a little hard at the end and just being so dehydrated, I drank 9 liters of water that day. Well, I drank 8 liters. No, 9. It was 9. And then I think 1 in the tent, or else 8 and then 1 in the tent throughout the night to try to help get rehydrated. But even with me drinking that much fluid, I was still dehydrated. So I sat down in the tent, body started to cool off with all the sweat on me, and was kind of sitting when you're like facing uphill a little bit. So you're kind of not super comfortable, kind of trying to lean forward as you're sitting uphill just a hair, and had a snack, was drinking a little bit of water, went to stand up, and my lower ab cramped, which I've never had in my life. And I think with my like being dehydrated, it started to make me kind of black out a little bit, started to lose sight, and it was just extremely painful and didn't really let go, and then ended up dropping to my knee because I thought I might pass out, and was then eventually passed, but then my body just went into this.
You didn't pass out.
I didn't pass out, no. Kind of stood up from that. I mentioned something to Brigham, just so someone knew, and then I laid down in my tent, and I tried to take my socks off, and then my leg cramped up, and then I lay down, and then I go to try to take my sock off again, and my foot cramps up, and my whole body basically just started to cramp up different parts of it. My back cramped, my foot cramped, my leg cramped, my calf cramped, anytime I tried to use it. So I got so frustrated, and I started to get super cold and shaky, I think because I was still in all the sweaty clothes and whatever was going on. And so I ended up just pulling my top quilt over the top of me with one sock on, one sock off, not in my sleeping gear that I was planning on, and slept like that half the night before I woke up and could move without cramping up. So it was I don't know. I didn't want to make a big deal of it, but it definitely had me on edge, to say the least. And so that whole night, I just focused. I had a whole liter of water sitting in the tent with me, and by morning, I finished that liter of water. At one point in the night, when I woke up and could get my sock off, I ate like a bar just to try to get some more calories in me and some more salt and whatnot. And while I was eating and drinking, you know, salt and carbs can help with absorption of water. And definitely was like, man, don't repeat something stupid at elevation where you could, you know, put yourself at risk of getting altitude sickness. And so just chugged water there the next morning. That was kind of the MO for me. And to skip ahead a little bit, thankfully, I felt by midday I had been able to rebound and rehydrate, and really was just back to total normalcy. But yeah, that was how day one ended for me. And that's when I like realized, just again, looking back, like it's, I don't know how, I mean, I guess I could have just forced more and more fluid down, but it's hard to tell how much you're really losing in those conditions. Cause I'll be honest, I've never hiked in 80 and 90 degree weather climbing that kind of elevation. That was a brand new experience for me, and turned out to be a good learning lesson. Okay. Yeah, starting off day two, what was the plan? How did it go?
Well, day two, we planned on packing up. We actually decided, because day one had been so hot and miserable, we kind of rolled into camp a little bit late. We decided to allow ourselves to sleep in a little bit, but we wanted to roll out and get 20 miles down the trail. I can't remember what the title of that destination was where we're trying to get to for the next campsite.
At the end of the day, we got just below Black Hawk Pass.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So we had just barely on day one got into the high country, like you mentioned, and day two we started out actually with some really cool views. We left camp and got onto some ridges for a little while, and there's some really, really pretty stuff that we saw. We followed the ridgeline for just a little while before dropping down into the trees again. Unfortunately for me, I think the first half of the day really was the highlight on day two because of those views and the ridgeline. After we dropped down to the trees, I think the temperatures, they picked back up again, and there wasn't a lot to see other than, you know, just walking through the woods, which I do enjoy, by the way. But yeah, we were kind of just making our way. You know, I don't remember too much that was very significant after the ridgeline until we got to just below Black Hawk Ridge.
Yeah, day two for me was a bit of a tease. It was a tease, according to my expectations. So day one, I kept thinking, we keep going up and up and up, and the scenery is not becoming what I expected it to until the very end, and it was really nice. And so getting up that day two, that morning, was just glorious and beautiful, and I was really enthused about the scenery. And for about the first 4, maybe 5 miles, we're in this terrain that is exactly what I expected it to be like most of the time, and it was really invigorating and fun to be out there and to be in this new place, to see the vastness of some of these mountain basins and ridgelines and some lakes. And so it was like I started the day with a bang, and then after that, almost the rest of the day, it was what I felt was a little bit average in terms of scenery, because we went down a little bit in elevation, but we're still talking like 11,000 feet. And in my mind, that terrain should be the same, but in these mountains, it's not. It was mostly wooded, and so we spent many miles that day in hot weather again, and just kind of going through more wooded terrain, and it wasn't, you know, the spectacular views that I kind of thought were just going to be present all day long. And so that's why day two for me was a bit of a tease in terms of scenery, because I started out real strong with that gorgeous scenery, and then it kind of went downhill a little bit for me for the rest of the day.
You know, to be fair, another perspective that may be putting a dampener on how we feel about the second half of day two was, also the fact that we had I think a 16-mile water carry, between where we could filter water, which is never very fun when you got to carry a lot of water weight, and if you run out, you're just going to get kind of behind in hydration.
Yeah, we also goofed that water carry up because we stopped somewhere and we're like, oh, there's more water in a mile, and then the water carry starts. Well, we buzzed right past the very last water, so none of us had quite as much water as I think we would have planned on for the whole carry. But the good news about that whole day was if you're going from Durango northward, it's mostly downhill, and it was shaded a lot. So even though we weren't having the same views as kind of what we had right off the bat in the morning, I was grateful that it was mostly downhill and it was mostly shaded, and it was still a very hot day, and so we were able to put down a lot of miles that day. I think that was our biggest mile day, right around like between 23 and 24 miles.
Yeah. We did mess up that water carry, and that was a little frustrating, but I think all of us were only planning to grab one last liter, so we were all pretty weighted up on water before we got too far down the trail and realized it. But
luckily, it wasn't too crazy though, because we weren't climbing a lot during that water carry.
Yeah, nothing really slowed us down much in those 15, 16 miles. No big climbs, no big descents. We were able to hold a very steady 20-minute mile pace for pretty much the whole second half of that day. One of the things I think that I do find interesting about the San Juan Mountains in really southern Colorado is the tree line. If you've ever been to different levels or northern latitudes of tree line, they change, right? So if you're up in Montana, a tree line could be, say, at 7,000 feet. Well, here, this far south, the tree line is like 11.5 or I mean, it's just really
I think
high.
It's higher than that even.
Yeah, in some areas it feels like it's 12, and so by the time you break out a tree line, you're not like a little bit high. You're extremely high compared to other parts of the country. So to Brigham's point earlier, where he's saying, we're still hiking the whole day at 10,000 plus feet, and we were in trees. That's just not common for a lot of the high mountain terrain that you can get into where you're breaking above tree line. So something to calculate. And one of the things that I think make the San Juan Mountains that much more challenging, one, they're extremely sharp. I mean, like every canyon, it just feels like is just straight up and straight down. It's basically, if you weren't on the trail we were on, that was walking like a fairly decent ridgeline, like every other side of the mountain is just straight down. I mean, to the level you're like it feels almost like cliffy. It's just so sharp.
Well, I think day 2 is where we started to kind of recognize just how good the construction is and the maintenance is on the Colorado Trail. Out in Utah and Idaho and a lot of the places that we go, when you're in that subalpine, alpine kind of terrain, a lot of the hiking is like just loose scree, horse trails or game trails, and this was like very nice trail, and we were very appreciative of that. But I think days 2 and 3 was where we really started to realize, like, hey, there's been a lot of work put into the route of this trail, and paying attention to the grades and paying attention to the maintenance, and I was very impressed with that.
Yeah, I mean, should we talk about shoes for a minute? Should we break it up? I tried on some new Hokas this year after watching these guys try them and just hear a lot of different good things about them. And I've definitely never finished 100 miles of trail with my feet feeling as good as they do right now. I was very, very happy with the Hokas, and 3 of us on the trail had Hokas. Brigham, you did not. So what's your report?
Well, yeah, the last 2 years I have been using Hoka Speed Goats, This year, well, about 4 months ago, I bought a pair of Solomons, and all my running has been with Solomon, these particular Solomons. So I've been running with them for like 4 months, and but what I did find is, given how smooth this trail surface was, my feet were significantly more sore than my feet ever were, after 100 miles using a Hoka Speed Coat. So I was really frustrated that I was having any tender foot issues, in what seemed like a pretty mild or easygoing trail surface. That's a definite thumbs down on long distance hiking with those Solomons. I think the model is Pulsar Trail, but yeah.
You have to tell the rest of that unfortunate story where you had the other shoes.
Oh, well, yeah. So I didn't plan to hike with these shoes. I had ordered a pair of Sauconys, and I kind of made the decision sort of last minute, but I paid like $30 for rush shipping, so that I could have them in time for this trail. And so I got them like 3 days before, and so in plenty of time, and I take them out of the packaging and look at the size on the box, and it's the correct size, and then I take the shoes out and I look at them and think, these look kind of big. So I checked the tongue, and sure enough, they were the wrong size. So they were one size bigger than the box said and one size bigger than what I ordered. So that was kind of a bummer. Anyway, bad shoe situation for me this year.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I have been using the Salomon Sensoride 4s for the last 2 years, and I always thought they were a solid shoe. I never thought they were like a phenomenal shoe, but definitely after trying out the Hokas, I feel a little bit cheated. Like I stayed in those shoes way too long, and there's been some better options for me out there. So maybe I'll have to do some more shoe testing in the future and just broaden my spectrums a little bit. But after having some plantar fasciitis and gutting into the Solomons and then getting a Curex insole, it kind of fixed that for me. So then I didn't want to touch anything for a while, and that probably was what left me in there. But anyways, probably enough on shoes for now. But if you're looking for shoes, there's a few touch points to build off of.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying, like, in our framework for the 100-mile challenge, we tell people to not take brand new shoes out, or like not, to do your troubleshooting and testing as early as you can in the season. I think Brigham is unique in the sense that he's our product designer, and every time he goes out, there's a whole lot of testing going on. So, but yeah, I'd say get your testing done as early as you can before you go out on your big trips, and you'll be more comfortable.
Okay. Any other good stories from day two?
I actually do have one. This is probably the most significant thing that I remember from day two, which is, we passed some more hikers, but one of them towards the end of the day, he had started in Durango as well, and he was working his way towards Denver was his original plan, but he was rethinking that and wanting to at least just get to Silverton and then kind of look at his options. The reason he was rethinking everything is because his pack was enormous, and it probably weighed 80 pounds. Tyler, you tried it on, right?
I picked it up, yeah. He told us that it was 75 pounds, and he invited Tayson to pick it up, and Tayson's like, no thanks. And I went over and picked it up, and it was, like, no doubt in my mind, heavier than 75 pounds. It felt like he had a bag of cement in there with all of his like camp gear tied to the outside of it. And he had a lot of camp gear like hanging off the outside. So not only was it heavy, but there was a lot of leverage pulling you backwards because the weight was dispersed so far back from his back. And my guess would be 85 pounds or more.
Well, and to build on your point, Derek, he was rethinking his itinerary essentially because he was going much slower than he thought he would, right? So he was saying
so he was needing 12 liters of water in that dry.
Yeah, because he was only getting 5 miles a day. So when he left what was called Taylor's Lake, you left Taylor's Lake, did a big hike, and then there was actually more water a little bit farther down the trail. But either way, he had been carrying water from Taylor's Lake. He'd filtered 12 plus liters of water. I don't know if it was 12 liters at Taylor's Lake or if that's what he still had when we caught up to him. But that was also a massive part of why his pack was so heavy. But
his trekking pole was bent like a U. Like he had one straight pole and one super bent one. Like that gives you an idea of how heavy he was going.
And he filtered water, started up the climb out of Taylor's Lake, realized it was just too ridiculous, went back to a parking lot a mile away, gave some of his stuff to people in the parking lot, and then came back. So his pack wasn't even as heavy as it was when he started out, right?
Yeah.
Like he'd already given some stuff away. But I guess the whole thing on this, right, is like everyone can do their own styles, their own hikes, and there's reason. I firmly believe there's times and places to bring more gear, extra gear, nicer stuff. It's all situational, right? But for a through hike, that's really hard, and a lot of that to me builds into the conundrum of if the more weight that you have, the less miles you can do. That's just a fact, really. Like if you had an ultra runner who can run 50 miles in a day, you put a pack on them that's 10 pounds, it might knock it down a little bit. You put a pack on them that's 20 pounds, it's going to knock it down more significantly, 30 pounds more significantly, and just going down to where they would also maybe be doing 5 miles a day if they had a 100-pound pack on, right? But it built this conundrum for him where it was like, because he only did 5 miles a day, then he had to carry 12 or 15 liters of water and vice versa. And it's just kind of this downward spiraling slope that it felt like this guy was caught in. And it was kind of rough to watch. He did not, he was smiling, but he was also standing there with the cold soda from a really nice camper van lady. But he didn't seem like he was having as much fun as he thought he would when he set out.
No way. That guy looked like he was just slogging through the mire. That's how I would describe it. Just everything about what he was doing made what he was doing more difficult. And it was just unpleasant to even look and just kind of listen to what he was describing. It was, felt really bad for the guy.
It's rough.
Yeah, we don't say that because we want to talk down on anyone. We just, it's probably the most extreme example I've ever seen on the trail of someone being overburdened and just really feeling the pain of it. And as we just talked to him real briefly, and I was trying to figure out how we could help him on trail, but I just couldn't figure out much more than for us to just try to pass a little bit of knowledge on, and kind of tell him how we were doing things. But hopefully he will make it to Silverton in the next couple days and sort things out a little bit. He seemed really gung-ho and like he was gonna keep trying, and I think he'll figure it out. That's just one where he went to the school of hard knocks first.
Yeah, Brigham, you say this a lot, but experience is the best teacher, right? And I think that's a situation where he was learning actively by giving his stuff away on the trail, by getting to Silverton and maybe cleaning things out a little bit more. But there's a reason that we do, us ourselves do things the way that we do. And a lot of that comes from, miles and experience collectively. And I think if you're interested in going and doing a big trail, there's so much knowledge out there, at least, try to consume some of it. So that you don't have to learn every lesson in life yourself. There's a really good quote that I heard decades ago that was, life's too short.
Sound old.
Yeah, that does make me sound old. I'll just say a decade ago. That said, life's too short to learn from your mistakes alone. And that's something that's worth internalizing. So, okay, any other stories from day 2? We did get to camp.
We met some really fast thru hikers on day 2.
Yeah.
Like we ran into at least 2 different guys that I remember who were, one of them was going to be finishing the Colorado Trail in like 17 days. And then the other one,
it was day 17 or something.
he
so
was
yeah.
on day 16, and
Okay.
he was within range to finish the next day when I talked to him. So that was
About
really
25 miles a day is what this guy was averaging.
and he was happy and just hauling the mail down the trail. So he was fun to talk to. We talked to another guy later in the day who was on like day 20 as well, and he was very dialed, and it was just really fun to see how those guys do things as well. Get to talk to them.
Yeah. As far as our camp that night, found a nice little place next to water, got through that water carry, and I think the only thing that I would call out about that was we did do a bear hang, and then like 5 minutes later after we got our stuff up, right in our camp, basically, we had bear poop. So it's a good thing we got that done. And then we had some really friendly deer that just guarded our tents all night.
All night.
Okay, day 3.
We started just below Black Hawk Mountain. So the first order of the day was to get up and over that big pass. And the plan was 21 or 22 miles. Right?
Yeah, I think 21, something like that. So that sounds right. Yeah, so we had a climb right out of the morning, and then just to cover quite a bit of country, and then a climb to basically end the day for the most part. But at this point, we were back in the high country, really from the moment we left camp until we got to camp that night. We had, it was... Did I say that? I think this was like a medium level day. It was like 3,000 feet of climbing and 3,000 feet of descent, something like that. And
I've got us at 5,000 feet of climbing that day.
what? 5,000?
Yeah.
Dang. Maybe it's more than I remember then, because it was spread out throughout the whole day, which is always nice. But yeah, just again another really. I don't know. Like, I'm just trying to think of like what the highlights are, what things to call out. But I know the biggest highlight, which I'm sure everyone will comment on, is we ended up dropping into a canyon towards the end of the day that was just probably one of the biggest canyons I've ever been in my life, I feel like. And there's just waterfalls pouring off all sides of the canyon, and had this massive basin, at the end of the canyon. There's a 700 foot peak above us. I don't know. It's one of those things that's kind of just sealed in the memory, and super, super enjoyable place to be, and just an amazing, amazing views. But
it was incredible. Like it's like this huge high elevation basin with like down the middle, in the middle of the bottom, like this really deep canyon cut through one of the big rivers with some of those waterfalls that you've mentioned, Tayson. And I think for me, everything looks so much more awesome when it's cloudy or stormy a little bit. Like, and some rain clouds did roll in right about when we got to that canyon, and everything just kind of looked really cool. It's just this really neat, kind of unique mood through all the scenery that was around us that time of day, and I loved it. That was one of my favorite parts of the whole trip.
Gave us some extra energy because all of a sudden we thought we were racing the storm clouds over the pass, right?
Yeah, we heard the thunder in the distance, and we have had enough experience, I would say, to just expect it to get rained and to get ugly when we hear that. But thankfully, we didn't end up needing to race any rain clouds or anything like that. Just cooled us off a bit and left us alone.
Yeah, that was a really good day. Just starting the morning that way, climbing up over that pass, and the morning air, and kind of staying up high a lot of the day. And then even when we would come down into a deep canyon, we'd climb right out of it and get up high again. That was a great day. That canyon that you're talking about it was massive. And then for me, like, there was this very unexpected, like, intense waterfall that came shooting out of a really narrow section of that canyon. And just, the whole mood of that time of day was really cool because the wind was blowing really hard and we thought we were about to get dumped on, and then it really only just kind of sprinkled on us for a few minutes, and then we had a big climb. And I really enjoyed kind of our dinner stop location that evening, and because we had to climb out of that deep canyon, and we were about halfway out of it, kind of up towards the next pass, and it was a good, enjoyable dinner stop. And then climbing up over that pass that evening was it was a good climb, but it turned out to be hot too. Yeah, it was like all the clouds went away just in time for us to climb up this big pass, but it was still really beautiful. It was kind of that evening time, and that was when we ran into that. I think it was a father and son, but it was the Backpacking Scouter.
Yes,
the YouTube channel. But it was a really cool guy. He recognized us and talked to us for a few minutes, and anyway, it was fun to chat with him for a bit, and that was cool. I think it's a cool thing that he's doing and going out and doing the Colorado Trail, and they were almost done at that point, so good on them for doing it.
We saw a few father-son combos out on the trail,
and mother-daughter ones too.
Yeah. I mean, it was really cool. I thought that, like, it's a really cool dynamic to be able to go and share those memories like that.
Yeah, I think we all kind of agreed that day 3 was like kind of the perfect backpacking day. We had a good amount of elevation gain up and down. We had a good mix we had some shade, we had some really cool views, we covered a lot of country, and we all ended feeling really good. And when we got over that last big pass, we had planned to just get over the pass and then camp for night. So that was going to put us at like 19 or so miles for the day, 19 or 20. And right when we got to the top of that pass, it had turned out to be like no wind and quite hot. And then we saw the lakes down next to where we were planning to camp.
So Tyler's all like, I'm going to go jump into one of those things and start swimming in it. And these are like really high up, 11,000 feet.
Snow
melt. Actually, on some of them, there was snow right, like, touching the water. So he charges down there, and I charge after him because I'm like, I'm going to film this and make sure that we can show people Tyler doing this crazy thing. But we had plenty of energy to do that. Tyler and I were basically running down that mountain because we had a kind of a personal goal to beat the sun.
Yeah, I didn't want to swim in a glacial lake in the shade. I wanted there to at least be a little bit of sun, like evening sunlight, to help warm me up afterwards.
And I'm happy to report that we did win. We beat the sun, so we were able to still get to those lakes while it was still warm and sunny.
Yeah, that felt so dang good. It was cold at first, took my breath away for a second. I think the water was probably actually around like 50 degrees instead of, closer to 30 like I expected, because it was semi-shallow and it had been being heated up all day. But it was such a big relief on my legs. Specifically, my calves were kind of getting tight that day, and that cold water just felt amazing.
But before jumping in, Tyler, you did have a little bit of hesitation.
Well, I screwed up. I screwed up. My biggest mess up of this trip was I thought I put bug spray wipes in. I thought I put 2 wipes in each food bag for each day, because that's kind of like my rationing for the day. Well, turns out I only put 2 wipes in my entire backpack. And so I was going on day 3 of trying to use one wipe, like one bug spray wipe.
It was pretty nasty.
And so I got to the water and I was like, I don't know if I should wash off the little bug spray that I have. So I had to ask Derek, if I swim, will you spot me with some bug spray?
So which I gladly did, because I'm like, we didn't run all the way down here for you not to jump in this lake. And I had enough, so we did that, and then after that I'm like, well, I don't need to see sprawled out on the ground drying off half naked. Well, I don't know, maybe you got all the way naked. I wasn't there for that.
All the way naked. There's nothing like being all the way naked up in the mountains like that.
Yeah, well, I decided that it was my time to leave before that happened. And so I was going to go back. Brigham and Tayson, they stayed on the trail, and they didn't really want to jump in the lake, so they'd found a place to camp, and I'm like, well, I'm going to go find those guys.
There was enough lakes for everyone to have their own. I don't know what you guys
I was funk testing all my clothing. I'm not going to spoil the
R&D
test.
for Brigham. What was your excuse, Tayson?
That was some serious funk testing that we got done there. Serious. My excuse was you guys could have gone to the lake right next to the trail and you didn't.
It wasn't in the sun.
I wasn't gonna go walk a clear off trail just for the heck of it, I guess.
Well, I went to go find those guys, and because they'd stay on the trail, kept going a little bit, and so I head back over towards the trail, and get back on it and start hiking down, thinking, hey, I'll see them at some point wherever they decided to set up camp, because we knew we were gonna set up camp somewhere in that area, right by all these lakes, because there's a bunch all over the place. But as I headed down the trail, I got further and further. I passed this huge lake. There's this nice little stream kind of flowing out of it, a good place to filter water. I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. If we were going to set up camp, it would be here. It seems super, super convenient. But there wasn't anybody there, so I'm like, I guess they went further or something. So I keep walking down the trail, and pretty soon I'm noticing the tracks, because it is sprinkled earlier that afternoon, and the trail is so well maintained, there's a kind of a fine dust onto it, and it's pretty easy to see footprints. I noticed that the only footprints that were on the trail were headed the opposite direction, and so luckily I turned around and went back, the way I'd come, which is a good thing, because they'd actually camped back further behind where I had rejoined myself with the trail. So I got lost for a little while there. I had no idea where Tayson and Brigham went, but I found them.
Yeah, we started hooting and hollering. We thought you might go over the next ridge, so we actually yelled a little at you.
I think when I yelled the loudest, it caused a rock slide, didn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah, it did.
That was cool.
It was across the way. There was some rocks that started tumbling. At first I thought it was Derek responding, and then sat there and listened to the whole rock slide come down, which is...
Made me want to yell more when I get up there.
Yeah, I think other stories from the day were just that this was our first night that actually cooled off. It's probably my best night of sleep the whole time, because it actually, cooled off a little bit and was comfortable to sleep in.
Well, we were camped way up above tree line for that day.
Yeah, we were
way
12,000 plus. I want to say 12,1 or 12,2.
Yeah.
So that was really nice to finally get at least a little bit of relief from the heat, as well as hiking that day. We had both extremes. At times it felt good, and at other times it felt super hot. And there definitely was some hot sections in there for sure. But I would say other things that come to my mind from the day, we got to see those salamanders. What are they called?
The axolotls.
Yes.
Well, they look like axolotls. The jury's still out on whether or not they
could be tiger
salamanders, or if they're actual axolotls. But we got videos of them, so just...
We did do some quick searching since we've gotten into the car and hit the road. Axolotls, they only can survive in a couple of lakes in Mexico, and apparently also in a few lakes in Colorado. Stillwater lakes. Yeah. And so it's very possible that there was some relocated axolotl salamanders in there, since they've kind of been
hundreds and hundreds of them.
Yeah, but aren't they they're not extinct, but they're
endangered.
That's what I'm looking for. So we don't know, but they were cool looking. They have kind of like this finger looking thing sticking out from behind their heads.
They look like salamanders, but they have like a mane and they have gills.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. We got some footage that we recorded of those, so you can see that on an upcoming documentary. The other thing that I thought was we passed another lady early that morning that was quite a bit older, and we talked to a lady previously too, the previous day that was out there. Anyways, it was just cool to see that people were doing that at all ages of life as well. And I think that was just something that kind of stuck out to me was just like, man, you can, I don't know. One cool thing about backpacking and hiking is it's something that, if you choose to permitting, I guess, and extraordinary things, but it's a type of hobby that I hope to be able to do for a very long time. And I think I was just inspired by all of the different types of people we met out there. We met people out there with kids. They were hiking with kids, bikepacking with kids. We camped near someone who had like a 3 or 4 year old kid.
Yeah.
Was doing the Colorado Trail bikepacking. But it was just really cool to see all the different people out there that were getting it done, and how this can be a sport or a hobby that you can really do your entire life. So yeah, I think those were my takeaways from day 3.
I think another reason that we all enjoyed day 3 so much was because we covered a lot of ground and we could see how far we had come when we got to that big pass. And not only that, but we rolled into camp like well before the sun was setting. And so I got to go swimming, and I still set up my tent in the light, which when we're doing big days on these intense trails, sometimes we're setting up right at dusk or even in the dark. So I think we all appreciated the fact that we got to set up in the light, but then we even got to sit around and watch the deer and elk come out and just get to enjoy that evening a lot, which it was a great change of pace.
Yeah, the setting of that campsite, that was my favorite campsite of the trip for sure. The setting was like my favorite, just above tree line, and even just the tent sites themselves. It was like just this really soft, dry grass that was like only like 3 or 4 inches tall. There were hardly any bugs up there, so we could kind of hang out outside without being bothered, and we just had incredible views in probably like, I don't know, 180 degrees of direction, and so that was, to me, that was my favorite evening and night of the trip for sure.
Okay, so ended day 3, started day 4. This was our last full day on trail, actually, and we were going to be dropping down, crossing the Anamias River, going through Mullis Pass, then the Anamias River, which is also where the train tracks are, and then climbing up the other side into an area called Elk Creek. Plan was to do 22 miles and a lot of descent, about 4,500 feet of descent, and I think 2,700 feet of climbing was kind of the itinerary on the day. So we opted for an early start that morning. I want to say we woke up at 6 a.m. and started just to beat the heat. I think we were all in favor of trying to beat the heat. It was just ruthless on this whole trip. And so we got up early, hit the miles. And yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the first part of this day. We just, kept a lot of our, we slowly descended maybe, but kept a lot of the elevation and went around a bunch of different ridges and just covered more country in the high country, looking at all these far off 14,000 foot peaks and 13,000 foot peaks. And and just another really enjoyable morning. It was definitely cooler temps. The wildflowers were out, which I don't think we've talked about yet, but they were, the length of the entire trail, they were definitely out. And just had a good, smooth start to the morning. after, I guess we did go down, we crossed the highway. This is our only highway crossing of the trip at Mullis Pass, and took our lunch just a little bit past that, and then proceeded to drop all the way down into the canyon.
Tayson made this comment at the end of that day. He's like, wow, like with the amount of elevation we just lost, and then the next day, the amount of elevation that we gained back, that was essentially the equal of crossing the Grand Canyon rim to rim in mileage and elevation. So we called that the Grand Canyon of the CT.
That was about 4,400 feet of elevation loss that we had that day, which we knew we were going to have to make up on the last day, or partially that day, and then on the last day.
It was kind of crazy. Once you cross the highway and started dropping for real, like we'd been gradually dropping in elevation before the highway, but after that it started getting, steeper and steeper and more consistently, headed in a downward direction. It was just a whole lot of down for a lot of miles and a few thousand feet. When I was hiking down that, I passed a few hikers that were heading the opposite direction, and a lot of them looked super miserable. They were coming up after crossing the train tracks to kind of get up towards where the highway is, and they weren't having a very good time. I ended up handing them some high chew candies that I had in my hip belt pocket.
You never gave me any candy.
You didn't look.
What the heck, man? I never got high chew.
You guys didn't look tired enough. These guys were like, they're a little bit older, and they were just, I'm like, you need a quick energy shot? I got some candy, some sugar. So that's, kind of creepy of a stranger to do, but I gave them, I was that guy. But they seemed happy for it. But I'm glad I still had some left for going up the next side for some of those quick sugars, because we had plenty of our own climbing to do after crossing the train tracks.
Yeah, so that canyon, being down at the bottom of that canyon was really awesome. We got to see 2 trains go past and toot their horns and just echo down that whole canyon, which is way cool. And we say canyon, but it's like a whole valley canyon mix. It's just so big in there. Got to go down there. We started walking down the train tracks.
We were supposed to just cross the train tracks, but we got lost.
Yeah.
We got excited about flat ground for a second.
Tyler found a new tent stake, though.
Yeah.
Well, so just to clarify what the train tracks are, so this section of the CT crosses over this railroad, and it's a train that takes you from Durango to Silverton or back, vice versa. So it's a really high elevation passenger, kind of a touristy, scenic train ride, and it passes right through this valley. So that's kind of what we're referring to with the train tracks. It's just this giant, beautiful canyon valley that this scenic drive train goes up and down throughout the day, and it's kind of cool.
It's basically wilderness. Like, you can't drive. There's no dirt roads in there. There's no, like, it's the only access to this canyon. So people actually use this train to gain access to wilderness areas in this area in the San Juan. So it's a really unique train.
It's brutal terrain to try and build a road or a railroad into. So the fact that there's a train there is so impressive. It really makes me want to learn a lot more of the mining history of that area, because they did some crazy stuff there.
So we got cruising down the railroad tracks, and then after a minute I said, well, let's check the map, and sure enough we were just cruising down the railroad tracks, not cruising down the CT. So we took a bridge trail that jumped us back onto the CT that was pretty straight up, and then we started the climb next to the Elk Creek. I guess it's a creek, but it seemed like a river. It was roaring. Started up Elk Creek and just climbed. The nice part about this was, I think after all of the down, the climbing up actually felt pretty nice. And other than a few sections, it wasn't too steep. So I think we were all just enjoying this canyon now too. It was just really pretty, great views, huge, massive peaks up above us. to look at, and an awesome raging creek down below us to view. So came up there. I think we realized pretty quick that canyon was like competitive camping down in there. It was like we're in the middle of nowhere, and tons of people in there. I don't know if they were. I assume that that not all of them were thru hikers. That a lot of them were riding the train in and then camping in that canyon, and then just kind of using it as a full experience between train and backpacking. So saw a lot of people in there. Saw a lot of them had. There's just some gorgeous campsites in there, and we ended up getting our 22 miles in and finding campsite right before the canyon got kind of too narrow to really be able to find much for camping, and started to get, I guess, too steep for camping. So
that was definitely a really tight canyon compared to what we had been in most of the other hike. Just very straight up and straight down on the canyon walls. The creek dominated the bottom of the canyon, and then there's just tons of vegetation all around, and so it just felt very wild and jungly, and like you just had these massive peaks on either side of you. So it was a unique spot.
It's a really, really beautiful canyon. I think I agree with Brigham, though, what he said earlier today about, it seems very, very likely that the people building the trails through Elk Creek Canyon were prisoners. Because, so many of these trails did not make any sense. They would just pretty much go straight up the steepest incline, and almost to the point that when you're trying to climb up it, you didn't have enough traction or grip to even get up it. You take a step and almost start sliding backwards down the dirt because it's so steep.
Yeah, I think we just got spoiled from the trail conditions leading up to it. They were always so good, and then this day, going up this canyon, it was just such a stark contrast from everything else previous. So it just seemed like there was no rhyme or reason to what direction they decided to cut the trail straight up the side of the mountain versus back down towards the river. There was one really interesting switchback that was about 6 feet long to avoid a little spruce tree, and then it was back to just like this random
straight up
thing. But hey, if you're a prisoner, you probably make great trails. Anyway,
it was definitely back to the more wild backcountry type feeling trails that we get when we're doing our own exploring in Utah and Idaho, where you're just kind of following old trapper trails, not really well thought out,
engineered
and very heavily worked and maintained.
Yeah, that canyon definitely had a very rugged and remote feel. I really liked it. Aside from all the people, which was just really odd, but the canyon itself, yeah, it really
wild.
did feel rugged, wild, and remote. It was cool.
Yeah.
Like Tayson mentioned, because of all the people, we did end up kind of camping that night in a place that wasn't used very often. There was a campfire kind of ring that someone had built there before, and obviously a space where that the grass had been kind of flattened out a little bit, but it was clearly not a campsite people had used a lot, and it wasn't marked on the Far Out app that some of us had been using to find water sources or campsites and things like that. But we ended up making it work. It was a little bit hard. It was a little bit tricky to try to find 4 places for 4 different tents there, but we eventually did find flat enough places to camp and ended up camping right there. And honestly, I think that was my second favorite campsite in that canyon. When we woke up, the sun was hitting the peaks of some of those steep mountains that Tyler mentioned, kind of around us in that little area. And it was a kind of a meadow where it opened up, so you could kind of see through the trees, or there wasn't really trees blocking your view, but waking up and seeing that little canyon in the morning was really, really pretty.
Yeah, that was the end of day 4. Any other, I guess, storylines to wrap in here? How is everyone feeling? Any highs, lows, issues? to touch on? I feel like everyone kind of had their own minor little issues. I know quite a few of us did end up using a little bit of Luco tape. I know Tyler created his own issue with the swimming adventure.
I had taped up a toe before I went swimming, and then after I went swimming, I didn't re-tape, and it turned out that while I was walking around in the mud of that lake, I got rocks inside of the tape. So I walked the first probably 10 miles of the next day with a rock inside of the tape. That didn't help anything. It was like I was an oyster trying to make a pearl or something in my foot.
Don't tape rocks to your feet. That's rule number one of taping your feet up.
Yeah.
My socks had got so dirty, and somehow I was kind of scooping enough dirt into my sock that I also created a blister. So I ended up taping up my feet, I think day 2 on just one spot, and that held the whole time. But yeah, I mean, I think other than that, it's pretty incredible, I guess, that we have the group that we have that can go out into these conditions and kind of cold turkey start on a trail doing over 20 miles a day, continue to hold that pace and work through issues. And I think we've, obviously built up our abilities over time too. And I think, whether that's fueling, hydration, we all kind of have our own little different ways of doing things that we've learned. And I think it shows, right? This was, knock on wood, we didn't have to send anyone off the trail, which we've had to do before a couple times from sickness or elevation or whatever it is. I think we all at different times had little things pop up, whether it's calorie walls or hydration or anything else, but we're all pretty good at adapting to them now and just moving on. So really no major issues to report.
Yeah, well, one thing, it wasn't major, but it was a little unique for me on this trip. Like almost the whole time, I was taking advantage of a lot of calf stretching rocks. Like it's almost like every time we'd stop for water, I'd feel like I wanted to stretch out my calves, and they never like cramped or locked up or anything, but they always just felt like I appreciated a good calf stretch like every time we stopped.
Yeah, I think there was a few of us that had tighter calves on the trail. I think Tyler brought a Rology ball. How did that work out? Did you end up liking it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think, I didn't want the plantar fasciitis to come back, so I rolled my feet in my tent most nights, and I would do it sometimes at lunch when we take our shoes off. And I think it's a awesome little tool to have on trail. I think the biggest thing is just doing proactive recovery work, like what Brigham was doing. He was stretching before cramps, and me rolling before there was issues. I think being preventative about stuff is way better than trying to fix issues after they become a bigger deal.
Well, and on that note, one thing that I know I just didn't act on, I guess, on day 1 or I don't know, maybe it was even my day 2, but I'm a big advocate of taking my shoes off at lunch and letting my feet dry out and potentially inspecting your feet if there's any issues. And if I had done that like I normally do every day, I probably would have caught my issue with just a lot of debris in my shoe and dirt in my sock around my heel. For some reason, it's just kind of trapping right there. And I probably wouldn't have worked up a blister. I've spent hundreds of miles in these shoes with no issues, but typically it's, 5 to 20 miles at a time. And, then the shoes come off. And so it's just, so I don't know. I think that would have saved me, just that preventative, taking my shoes off. Now, I know not everyone in the car even likes to do that, but for me personally, that's something I like to do. My feet are very sweaty too. So
I think it was
just by airing them out for a second at lunchtime, it does a lot for preventative and preemptive care.
Yeah, you used to be on the trail runner gator bandwagon with me, and then you told me you didn't need them anymore about a day before you got the issue.
A day. That's because you only asked the day before. When I started running these Hokas, I never did put a gator on them. I just never was kicking up enough dirt into my own shoe or whatever it was to feel like I needed the gators. But that was proved wrong on this journey. I constantly was getting, and I wasn't really feeling it, but like when I'd stop to check, yeah, sure enough, I had debris every single time in my shoe. And that's what led to my little blister. So I feel like, yeah, I'd run a gator again just to avoid kicking or whatever, or other people kicking debris into your shoe.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that. When we're in a group and we're going fast, we might kick a little bit of dirt and rocks into each other's shoes and things like that. So that might be part of the difference between your training.
Or if you're Brigham, you might just stab someone's foot with your trekking pole.
Brigham, at one point, was that this morning or last night?
Sometimes it's nice to just settle the tip of your pole into a nice soft tissue.
I was just standing there. We'd paused on the trail for something. I don't remember what. And then I just looked down. I start feeling something in my foot. Like, what the heck is going on? And like, I look down and Brigham's just like slowly stabbing his trekking pole into my foot.
Like,
actually
with dead eye contact.
Through the laces. It was like going through the laces of Derek's shoe, like past his tongue and like into the top of his foot.
It was like going into my shoe. I was just like, well, he wasn't looking at me. I was like, what is happening? What? So I kind of like just,
I don't know. You said
grab his trekking pole and like gently put it next to my shoe.
but you
on
also
the ground.
said
I'm
something
like, this is a better place for that.
Hey, I don't know, something really polite, but like, I don't know what it was, because had you not said something, I would not have even known. No idea. I had no idea.
We had a lot of good polite corrections on this trip, like when we were going through a tunnel and I was like, that's a cool bridge, and Tayson's like, I think that's a tunnel.
I think this is more of a tunnel. Oh, yeah. No, it was, I don't know where we were at, but preventative care, urology ball.
We basically just have day 5 left, which is today, having just wrapped up the trail.
Yeah, so today we decided to get an extra early start, set our alarm clocks for 5:30 in the morning, again, because we just wanted to beat the heat. We knew we had like a 2,000 to 2,500 foot climb right out of the gate, and just thought, hey, what if we could get that done in the cool morning temperatures before the sun hits us? Because we were in a canyon where the sun would be slower to hit us. So we went ahead and woke up real early and got started real early. And yeah, I mean, I think these guys kind of touched on it a little bit already, but climbing out of the canyon today was, I think, a highlight for a lot of us. It was just extremely pretty. You're getting higher and higher. You're basically getting above tree line. You're getting closer and closer to these big 13,000 foot peaks of just granite and limestone above us. And yeah, just incredibly pretty, cool temperatures. It was the first time and the only time on the entire trail where I felt cold for half of a second. Like my hands were cold.
Yeah, I hiked comfortably in the Nebo windbreaker like 3/4 of the way up that, because it was pretty cool.
Yeah, we said that day 3 was probably our favorite day as far as like how amazing all the views were and everything and the terrain we were in. But I think that this morning, day 5, hiking up out of that canyon, those first 3 miles, which during those 3 miles we did climb the 2,000 feet that Tayson mentioned. Those were my favorite 3 miles of probably the whole trip. Being able to see that really narrow, steep canyon in the morning light as the sun was rising was just amazing. And the higher I got, the more like really unique waterfalls and rock features became visible, and I loved every minute of it. I think it also helped me to just enjoy it more with the cooler temperatures. I wasn't just focused on getting sweat out of my eyes or whatever else. It was just kind of, as long as I could keep breathing, I could keep hiking and enjoying the view.
Yeah. I don't know if there's much else to pull out of that climb out. Got up to the top, met a few hikers on the way, said hi to them, and then essentially, Brigham and Derek started a little bit earlier than us, but I think both of those guys were moving up the trail a little faster. Me and Tyler were taking some photos and shooting some content. And these guys asked for the car key in case they got ahead of us again, that maybe they'd just try to get all the way down into Silverton ahead of us. And I would say there's a bit of a standard now that when Brigham and Derek are on the last day, their stride gets a little longer, they get a little faster, and I didn't think we'd see you guys the rest of the day. Actually, we were kind of swapping bets. I thought you guys might.
You almost didn't.
Yeah, I am surprised. Like when you guys came back towards us on the trail, I was surprised. But
well, we would have passed you down the road with our new friend Tayson, but that's later for the day. But yeah, essentially, Derek and Brigham must be able to gawk and not trip as just better than me and Tayson, because I was just feeling like we had plenty of time, so I wanted to go slow and have a field day with the camera and just soak it all in. And I don't think those guys feel like they go too fast, but for me, I just sometimes like to slow it down and really soak in.
I want to ask, do you guys feel like you hiked the same speed or faster today?
I thought it was pretty much the same speed we were going most days.
Yeah, I couldn't say consciously I was hiking any faster. Maybe I was, but all I do know is that today's hiking was amazing. Like, I just love it up there. That's in the alpine above tree line. So there's the possibility that my energy levels are just really high because I'm just really invigorated and happy, like just excited to be up in that type of terrain. And so it's a possibility that I sped up, but I didn't, there was no intention to.
I actually slowed down a little bit, I felt like, at some points. Today I probably had the worst issue that I had throughout the whole trip with my feet. So there was a lot of side hilling, and today the area we were hiking through, the trail was really narrow and a lot less well taken care of, at least when compared to the trail from the first 3 or 4 days. And so with the side hilling, as we were kind of going along the side of some of these different mountaintops and hills way up there, the trail was a bit uneven, and it kind of tilted my foot consistently enough across enough miles that I felt like, that little ball on the outside of your ankle, it was constantly getting jammed into the sidewall of my shoe, really uncomfortably, to where it started swelling up and was causing a real amount of pain. And I was struggling pretty hard with that, to the point where I was really trying to walk on my foot really weird to try to avoid my shoe from hitting the ball of my ankle there. And definitely slowed me down quite a bit. I was using muscles that I normally don't use when walking because of the way I tried to contort my foot to keep that shoe from just jamming into my ankle like that. So, that's the only issue that I really would say was the worst from this trip that I had. And I don't know. I don't think I went fast with that for sure.
Yeah. I didn't. That's what I assumed. I assumed both of you guys would say no, we were just hiking our same pace the whole time. But based off of watch statistics, which never lie, right? We never have discrepancies.
There's zero discrepancies between these three people's watches.
Yeah. You guys were booking it.
We were still doing our normal 19-minute.
We were doing very much our normal pace, and most lunches, which were at 12:30 typically, we were at 9 miles. We were at 10 miles by 11:30. You guys were there at 11. You had your 10 miles in. So just looking at those metrics, I think you guys should know that you guys definitely picked up your pace significantly. There was times when me and Tyler slowed down the pace, on that morning climb a little bit off of our normal trajectory for some of the shooting. But there was no breaks had, no stoppage for you guys, and you guys booked it to the end. I'm just saying. So But no, I would agree with Brigham. Brigham, you kind of made the comment of like you could just live up here for a few weeks at a time. It really is. It's just something really spectacular. I remember I always describe like the first time I went to areas like this, it was kind of like my expectation of going to somewhere like Alaska, like just completely different ecosystem, terrain, everything. And if you've never gone to this type of terrain and experienced it, it's well worth getting on a bucket list and making it happen because, every time I go there, I just want to go back or spend more time.
Yeah. And, that's just me. Like, I know that's not everybody's favorite. But I think for me, a lot of it is just, it's very nostalgic to like what just lit my fire about backpacking as a young kid was we would go on these backpacking trips into Idaho, and my dad would take me and my brother up into what he would just call the high lakes, and it was all off-trail travel, but we would go from this lake and then break up into the alpine above tree line, and we would just spend an entire day essentially trying to tag as many lakes as we could. And a lot of these lakes aren't even named; they're just numbered. And that I just remember as a kid being up there and feeling like it was just the ultimate kind of remote ruggedness of terrain that it's like been invigorating like since I was 5 years old. And so I think that's why I just get really excited about that kind of terrain, and it's very nostalgic for me.
Okay, so finished out the CT segment for us. We ended at Stony Pass, which was a good place for us to hop off the trail and essentially try to get a ride back into Silverton. Original plan was to take a trail down. We ended up starting to walk the road down, and I don't really know what happened, but if Tyler was just overly friendly or if this guy contacted you, but we literally got a ride with the very first vehicle that attempted to pass us.
I think he heard my joke about the truck, because I think he was up just a little higher when we were walking, and he's like, you guys all have the same uniform on, which is a comment we get a lot when we're all wearing the same color altitude and the same backpack and the same hat and like all the gear that we're testing. And we were just kind of like, yeah, we get that a lot. And then we kept going, and we see this little pickup truck with some bikes on the back, and the windows were all the way down and the hood was up, and we were just starting to walk down the road and like talk about trying to hitch a ride and talk a little bit of strategy. We're like, well, maybe if we split into two groups, we'll be more likely to get picked up and driven down into Silverton. And so we're walking past this truck that has the hood up, and I kind of like peeked into the hood, and I was like, well, maybe if we could fix this truck, we could drive it down to Silverton for whoever left it here. And I think he was not far behind us when we were talking and walking. And so here comes this pretty new little Chevy pickup down the road behind us, and he's like, hey, do you guys want to ride down the canyon? And we're like, we're too stinky to get in your cab, and we essentially just ended up hopping in the bed of the truck and riding down a really sketchy dirt road, talking to him through his back window. So I don't think Tayson will ever listen to this podcast, because he dropped his wife and daughter off to do to hike from Stony Pass down to the train, which is a serious hike, and he told us he hated that kind of stuff. So he was a funny guy, and we really appreciated his lift down the mountain.
Yeah, it was, I think in the back of our minds, we were all kind of like, oh man, how hard is it going to be to get a ride? Brigham was like, I'm just going to walk the 8 miles into town. Like that was kind of like, that's worst case scenario. But I definitely didn't expect the very first vehicle to pick us up, which was really cool and very nice of Tayson to give us a ride down. And also just that ride down was really phenomenal. We got to point out the sweet mine clear up on the cliff, but that terrain is just something else entirely. So there you go. We finished our OV 100 mile challenge collectively as a group. Did our first segment on the Colorado Trail. Had minimal to no real issues. Maybe let's just go through our rapid fire round. So, and anything else you want to add in closing remarks. But typically on the rapid fire round for these, we'll ask, is there a piece of gear you wish you would have left home? What was your favorite piece of gear? And feel free to add any additional comments. So if any of you guys are ready to jump right in, go right ahead.
I got it. Favorite piece of gear was Skyline shorts. With how hot it was, super nice to be able to have that much ventilation, and loved that. Something I would have left behind wasn't necessarily gear, but I definitely had too much food. I realized that I'd brought 2 extra backpacker meals, and then I didn't even hardly touch any of the food that I'd packed for today during the day.
I just didn't slow down long enough.
Well,
take breaks.
I had enough bars and different things left over from the other days that I ended up just eating those for breakfast or as I was going, or snacking along the way, that I really didn't need to eat the food that I'd packed for today. So I had a bunch of extra food weight that I didn't need to carry the whole way.
Right on. Anyone else?
Okay. Favorite piece of gear, I'm going to have to say, I don't know. It's always hard because somebody else is going to say one thing. I'll just say altitude hoodie. The thing took a beating and a chemical beat down and just functioned exactly how it was supposed to the whole time. I wore the hood the whole time for sun protection, and it did the job quite well. There really isn't anything I would leave home, honestly. Anything I didn't use, I would consider a necessity just in terms of safety. I was pretty happy with all the gear I had.
Yeah, I feel like at some point I'm going to need to change the question from what you would have left home, because I feel like most of us, we don't pack extras anymore. I feel like maybe when I very first started to ask that question years ago, there was still a lot of us in the group that would be like, yeah, I really didn't need this or something like that. But anymore, I feel like most of our systems are dialed where most of the stuff we leave home is more of, oh, I packed too much food, or like just, I don't know, not like you say, like you usually pack them for safety concerns. So if you guys have a better idea, I'm open to an additional rapid fire round question. But Tyler?
I think my favorite piece of gear would have been the altitude, but since Brigham took that one, I'll throw in another one, which was for me, being able to get my footwear dialed. On the last couple 100 milers, I've finished them with pretty tender feet, and this time I was feeling great. So between the super feet insoles and the Hokas and the Rology ball, I think that was all very good gear to have. So I'd say that was my favorites. I usually try to pack around 3,000 to 3,500 calories a day, and when I was packing food this time, I had a panic moment because I realized I wasn't even getting to 3,000, so I went and raided the pantry upstairs, and I don't think I ate a single one of the Cliff Bars that I threw in my pack for the sake of extra calories, because I don't eat them at home. My family eats them, but I don't like them. And I didn't eat them on trail, so I just packed like basically a box worth of Cliff Bars.
A box?
Yeah.
No wonder when I picked up your pack at the end, I was like
2 bars a day that I was neglecting, and I couldn't even give them to anyone. So
by that porcupine in Elk Creek, you could have given to him.
I didn't want to encourage any of those rascals.
Oh man, that's a lot of Cliff Bars. weighing down your pack, man. For me, favorite piece of gear, these guys left me the CS40, so I feel like I've got to take that one. Performed phenomenally as usual, incredibly comfortable, just day in, day out, 15-mile water carries, whatever it is you throw at it. Plenty of room. I actually think I could get, more like 8, 9 to 10 days of food in there. So just adequate room, but just a really comfortable pack. Even when my straps are so salty they're hard to adjust, still able to always get them adjusted and comfortable. But it was definitely a favorite piece of gear, and a gear you just use all day long. What I would have left home, I don't have a ton that I would have considered leaving home. Kind of like Brigham said, from a safety concern, but I did pack some extra batteries that I didn't need at the end. So for camera equipment, and I'm gonna go with trail mix. I did try to bring some more trail mix. Usually I can handle like a little bit of trail mix, but if I bring too much trail mix, it's really high calorie per ounce, but I get really fatigued of it and sick of it. And the first 2 days I was able to get it down, and the first 3 days, but the last 2 days I couldn't get any of it down. So that was a little bit of extra food as well. But overall, did well. I actually packed 4,000 calories of food a day and ate all 4,000 calories of food the first 3 days, I believe. And it wasn't until day 4 when I wasn't able to get it all down. And so that was interesting. And I definitely noted when I got off the trail that this was the first time that I wasn't just craving food in town, that I wasn't just, just having an issue with the food I brought, or feeling more fatigued or something like that. So 4,000 calories is a lot, but I think it wasn't the wrong amount. I'd love to be able to pack less and carry less, but it worked out for me pretty well this time. But maybe the longer I'm on trail, the more I start to diminish the calories towards the end. Maybe that's my new strategy. Start with 4,000 and go down a couple hundred calories a day until you're maybe at 3,000 on the last day would be a thing. But I never did get fatigued of my cheese witch on tortillas. And with mayonnaise. That's still a solid staple backpacking meal for me. So okay, guys, I mean, that's a run through of everything. It was awesome to meet a lot of people. I bet we at least had conversations with 8 different people that stopped us, recognized us on trail. Talked to one guy who recognized us, who had run into another OV100 mile challenge member on the CT. So the guy was from Texas. So he said he was selling them the gospel of outdoor vitals, just really telling them how great all the gear was. So he was planning on looking us up more at the end of the trail anyways. But it was just really cool to have conversations with everyone that did stop and talk to us along the way, and everyone that we met along the way too. It was definitely a really cool trip. Any final comments from you guys?
I was thinking about it when we were eating at that awesome barbecue place after, and I think this is one of my at least top 5 favorite backpacking trips I've ever done. So it was great.
That's solid to break into the top 5.
Yeah, it was an awesome trip, and I was really impressed with a lot of things we got to go see and do, and it's kind of nice being able to break up long trails like the CT into sections that are doable for people like me that we just can't spare more than 5 or 6 days. So I'm kind of grateful for that, and just the system that's built around that to be able to tee into the trail and get off when you need to and still cover a lot of country.
For me it was a great trip. It doesn't matter to me that there were some days that were maybe a little less than stellar in terms of scenery. I just think getting out there and having more and more experience and learning as much as I can, and just enjoying what's mediocre in terms of scenery is still beautiful. And I think one thing that I've kind of had a recurring theme in my mind is just with some of the people we mentioned encountering on the trail with very heavy loads or whatever, is like I I applaud them for going, and I think it's great for anyone to just get out there and just start somewhere. If you're starting in the wrong place, at least you're starting. So I enjoy seeing people like that, even though it looks terribly uncomfortable. But I think, I know they're learning something as they do it, and it kind of excites me. So it was a great trip, and that was kind of one of my takeaways from it.
Okay, there you have it. If you guys are interested in the OV 100 Mile Challenge, stay tuned for next year. We'll start that back up in 2024. Registration usually opens up around the first of the year. If you guys want to participate, it's a awesome way to just set a big goal and go get it done out on trail. You can do it either in one go like we did, or in a stacked version. If you want to look up more of any of the gear that we talked about in this podcast, you can do that at outdoorvitals.com. If you've got any questions, you can just open up the chat window there and ask our support team. They're phenomenal. They'll point you in the right direction and get you answers on anything that you need. If you're not yet, subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe. If you haven't rated the podcast, please do so. That helps us with our mission of helping connect more people to the vital outdoors. And with that, we'll see you on a future episode.